to be back. See some familiar faces. I'm Doniel. For those who don't know, I'm a marriage and family therapist. Operate primarily out of the Muncie area. And so we've covered a few important topics here over the last couple of years, not only here in this room, but at some of the retreats and other places. But on my way out today, when I mentioned to my wife the topic that we'll be addressing, she reminded me that this is one of the most important topics that we speak about. And I forgot. It's a topic, but it's really one of the most critical topics for a few different reasons. There was some discussion ahead of time, as somebody and I have mentioned, about the title. You know, they threw a title at me and asked if I could speak about it, and I said, I think so. But then the board got together to figure out, had to clean it up a little bit. So they cleaned it up a little bit. So I came prepared for a clean presentation, because I like to be truthful to the topic. But then I found out that I can go back to the original topic, and now that nobody knows except for us and the hundreds of thousands of people watching the video. So there's really a lot to say. I've got a ream of notes over here, but we'll see what we can accomplish together. We'll probably spend about 45 minutes. I'll present. We'll open the floor to questions. I can't guarantee you that I can answer all of your questions, but I'm sure we'll have a good time with them either way. So, let me begin by laying down a concept that I can probably best do by telling over a story that happened to me when I was 12 years old. So I went to this camp. It's a sleepaway camp. And it was a pretty crazy camp. I won't give the name. But they did interesting things. The head counselor, for example, used to practice golf on the main campus. And he would yell, 4, and then like the golf ball. You have to run into your bunk for cover, you know, that kind of stuff. So, kind of crazy things. So one day they decided that they were going to do a camp trip. And they told us that we were going to be going to a river. We should come with our bathing suits. And so we packed our bathing suits. And we got on this school bus. And they drove us down to the river. Now before we go any further, let me just check out my crowd here. By show of hands, how many of you are married? That was an easy one. It's a couple's presentation. How many of you have teenage children? Okay. How many of you have graduated teenage children already? Like they're already beyond adolescence? Oh yeah, some of you actually gotten past it. Okay, good. Show you. You're doing pretty good. And how many of you are not yet? You're pre-adolescent stage, but have not yet gotten to the point of adolescence. Okay, so most of you are dealing with the adolescence. Some of you have graduated some of them onto adult life, and others are still wondering what that's all about. So I really geared this presentation for parents of pre-adolescence and adolescents. And so back to our story. And so there we are, we're on the bus, and everyone's horsing around, having a good time. And there's some guy in the front who has one of these microphones that you can barely hear make out what they're saying on the bus. And he's saying all kinds of instructions, but nobody's really paying attention. We're just having a good time on the bus. And so we get lit off at the bus, and they say, okay guys, get into the river. The trip begins. So okay, that looks like fun. So we all get into the river, and we start to swim. And it's, it's fun, splashing, having a good time, and swimming. And at a certain point in time, the river had somewhat of a current. And it started to move us. And they said, this is really fun. The river's moving. We didn't realize it was a river. Actually, we didn't realize it was a river until it started to move. But that's okay. That's fun. We can stop, swimming and just let it take us away. And then it started to get faster and faster. And like I was 12 years old, so today I might have said it was just a somewhat of a moving river, but at 12-year-olds, we were kind of small, and it was moving pretty quickly. And I just remember our legs were banging against rocks, and we were getting stuck in different places along the river. Everyone's yelling for help, that they could be saved by the next guy. And we basically were going down rapids without a raft, and just on our own. I mean, that's quite an adventure, isn't it?
Life vest.
I don't remember if it was a life vest. I'm trying to remember if I have to believe they gave us life vests, but this is like 40 years ago, so who had life vests 40 years ago, right? There are no rules like this. If you could save a dime, you wouldn't get the life vest. So I might remember those life vests, but I do remember, banging our legs against rocks and getting stuck in different places and trying to save each other. And it was a real adventure. And only afterwards we remember that, did someone say about making sure your legs were up at all times? Did anybody follow the instructions about what we were supposed to do once we got into the river? And nobody really followed the instructions because we didn't hear the instructions. And so, thank God we all made it alive, but with a lot of bumps and bruises. That's just a story that happened in my crazy childhood. But years later, when I started to contemplate what adolescence is like and the life of an adolescent, I started to think about the idea of rapids. And thought about the adolescent years as going down rapids. Now, have anybody here been down rapids before? Without a raft? No? But yeah, but there's also different classes of rapids. You can have class 1, class 2. I think it goes up to class 6 or 5. Grand Canyon is the highest class. So it can get pretty dangerous. And some of them are mild, but others get more dangerous. So the journey of adolescence is really, today especially, is a journey down the rapids. And some kids are fortunate that the rapids they go down are not so intense. They're maybe with a good group, and they're in a good school, and they're in a kind of stable environment. So the challenges that they get exposed to may not be as great as others who, for whatever the variables are, whether the exposures that they have and the people that they're around, and again, it all depends. But some people really, really have a rough time. And so what I used to call the workshop was rapid alert. Like, here it comes. Your kids are about to go down the rapids of adolescence. But what do you need before you go down those rapids? So you say a couple of things about adolescence, and the kids aren't even paying attention. Basically, that's on the bus, right? You go down the rapids, make sure you have put your legs up. Nobody's paying attention. How do you catch the attention of your pre-adolescents before they're about to go down the rapids? We are the counselor on the bus, but we have to be much more effective than the guy that tried to give us instructions before the rapids. How do we get their attention? How do we speak the language that they can receive? That's the challenge that we have. So number one is to recognize that it's a rough road. Again, how rough it isn't always the same. But there's certainly going to be bumps along the way and challenges along the way. And our job as parents is, number one, to be aware of what those challenges might look like, and find a way to catch our kids' attention and be able to communicate them about those challenges. Does that make any sense? Okay, good so far? So, to put this into context, and I'm going to expand it because I know that we're not just talking about adolescence in the specific direction which I would take this presentation. I'll expand it to other areas as well. But let's just talk a little bit about this idea about the rapids. So you have your son, your daughter, preteens. What's the most important lesson? What's the best preparation? If you were going to make that announcement on the bus as your kid's about to go down the rapids, what are some of the most important messages you want to communicate to them before they go on that journey? Someone said before about, make sure you're wearing a life vest when you go down the rapids. Make sure your legs are up. Make sure you got a partner. Now, for those of you that went on the normal way to go down the rapids, which is with a raft, right? How many guys did that? How many did that? So if you went on a decent enough rapid where you had a guide, did you have a guide on the raft? Went down the Colorado River or whatever. So you got a guy in the back. whatever, and they actually tell you, make a left, make a right, we'll go this way, we'll go that way. The more serious the rapids, the more important it is to have a guide who's going to help you get down those rapids. So we don't just want to give them instructions, we also have to make sure that they're going to have a guide along the way of the journey. Who's going to be that guide? Who are the possibilities? So besides the instruction, I want to think about that for a moment. What do we want? What are the most important messages we want to be able to communicate to our kids, to get their attention and to communicate to them? And who's going to be the guide as they go down the rapids of adolescence? Who are the possibilities? Anybody want to put out some ideas? Yeah? Parents, excellent. Parents can be the guides down to adolescence, but are they the only ones who can be the guides?
No.
Friends. Friends of parents or friends of the friends?
No, I'm saying friends of the children. They listen to them.
Okay, well, I hate to have the blind lead the blind down the rapids. So in most cases, we're not going to want them to be the guide. We would like to have good friends so they could, be there to have positive peer pressure.
Grandparents, uncle, aunts,
You can have grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, mentors. It doesn't have to be the parents. It's nice that they know that we care and we're invested in them, but it doesn't have to be the parents. But there's got to be somebody. We have to make sure that somebody that our kids can confide in and can feel safe with, so that we know, okay, you know what, there's a challenge going on over here. Why don't you speak to so-and-so, or that you know they're going to speak to so-and-so, because that person's really, they have a good connection. So a connection to a guide is going to be critical down the rapids. But what's the most important message you want to communicate to them? Any ideas as to what you would want to announce on that bus to your kids before they're going down the rapids of adolescence? Yeah, you have an idea? Very good. Okay, so number one is that we're there for them. We could start putting these ideas down. We are there for you. Okay? So I'm going to come back and see how do you communicate that, but that would be one point to get towards. Any other ideas? Yeah. I'm sorry? Well, that's going to be a strategy, but I want to know is what message you want to communicate to them. So number one is, before you go down these rapids, you should just know that we're there for you. All right?
We love them. We trust you. We love them.
Okay.
We've been there.
We trust you? Okay, that's good. So we trust
safe.
you. We're good with that one? We trust you. Now, once again, let's understand this here. We trust you is very, very important. But there's a prerequisite to trusting somebody.
I would say that to myself. I trust you.
I'm sorry?
I would say that to myself. I trust you.
Right. So trust is very, very important. It's very important for teenagers to be trusted. But there's a very important prerequisite to trust them. And what's that prerequisite?
Get the knowledge.
Exactly, the knowledge. So if they don't know the dangers, how can I trust you're going to be able to navigate those dangers? So, right? So I can trust you if I know that you're knowledgeable about things. So we want to provide knowledge, so that we can then follow up with being able to trust them. Okay, what else? Someone else have another idea?
They're not alone.
They're not. Well, okay, we're there for you. Same idea.
Be safe.
We trust you. I'm sorry.
Be safe.
The message of communication is to be safe. Okay, that's good. But when we say give them knowledge, so I want to be more specific about that. What knowledge are we going to be communicating to them? What do we want to give? What do we empower them with? What kind of knowledge?
People around, who to watch against.
What the dangers are, maybe?
Yeah, what the dangers are, right?
Specific.
Okay. So
Consequences.
knowledge is the dangers. It's interesting. They have those. The DARE program. Do they have that in Queens? The DARE program.
Yeah, we used to have that.
They used to have it, right?
Now weed is legal, so.
I'm sorry?
Now weed is legal, so they're no longer use
Yeah, what is it?
weed.
Oh, weed is legal.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about weed, was it?
Right, no, it was about drugs in general, but I'm saying you're already legalizing that,
Right. So, did anybody ever go through the DARE program? Or,
Maybe ask them, make sure they understand what they're about to go to see, to make sure that they know, kind of feeling, what they're about to do, what about.
Oh, you're answering the question about what you
No,
want
I
to
don't know, because kids don't know, they assume that they know, but to be specific.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So to inform them about, understanding the consequences of behaviors. Right, so I mentioned the dare program because that was at one point it was very popular. I'm not sure what the status of it is today. I do remember I was once teaching in a school in Connecticut and they had a dare program there. So the police officer came into the room and he was the instructor. Is that what they did over here too? Was it a police officer that was teaching it?
Yeah.
Anyways, he came into the school. It was an upscale school that I was teaching in. And I was the teacher of that class and just stepped aside as the officer was presenting. And the kids were completely uncooperative. They were a disaster. And I said to the officer, I said, even with a gun in your pocket, even with a gun in the holster, you still can't get the kids under control. It's like, not afraid of, anyway. So I'm not sure how effective it was, at least in the school that I was in. But I'll tell you something, it's very tricky to teach teenagers consequences. So many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was an incredibly powerful video that was put out by an organization called the Mond Foundation. Have anybody heard about this? The Mond Foundation, M-O-N-D Foundation. And you can still access this on the internet. Recently I checked to see if it was there, and you can see this video, and it's, I would encourage you to watch it. It was a video to try to educate teenagers about the dangers of alcohol and drugs. And it's a dramatization. They had Shmuel Kamenetsky spoke, I think, on it, Dr. Twersky spoke on it, so they had various speakers. They had a recovering alcoholic, nice, young, articulate boy who spoke about what it was like. So there were some very compelling presenters on the video. And again, you can watch it if you want. But there was a dramatization. Must have been about 25 minutes. A dramatization with, they actually looked like a bunch of yeshiva guys in the yeshiva. I think it took place in the Waterbury campus up in Connecticut. But they had professional actors who dressed like yeshiva guys. It's very powerful. And a tragic story about what happened to someone drank too much at a wedding. And so between the lectures and the video, it was a real powerful punch about really getting to think about what can happen when someone drinks too much or gets stuck with drugs. So anyways, I watched it, I was very moved by it, and at the time, I showed it, or it had been shown to a lot of teenagers, and I kept on getting the same feedback from the teenagers. Essentially, he couldn't hold it drinking, and the amount that Dr. Twersky said that causes you to lose, your senses is completely, stringent. Nobody follows those numbers. And everything they saw, no matter how intense the video was, they found a way to distinguish themselves from that video. That's not me, that's somebody else. I feel like how much more powerful can you present the point of the dangers of alcohol, and they marginalize it. Now, it doesn't mean to say there aren't some teenagers that will benefit from it. And if you watch it with them and discuss it with them, it could be that your teenager will really be able to process the message. But it's very hard, it's very challenging to get a teenager to believe they're not invincible. And that's the challenge. So we definitely want to communicate the dangers, but how do you catch their attention and how do you get them to take it seriously? But we have to be able to figure out how to do that. Okay, so I would say, of all the things that we say, which I think are all valuable, and I want to come back to all of them, is that there's one central message to communicate, and we've got to figure out some way, somehow, because it's going to cover everything. It'll cover everything we want our kids to know and be prepared for adolescence if we can just get this one point across. And just to share with you, play with the Hebrew language just a bit so we can really appreciate the point. What is the Hebrew word for a teenage boy?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Very good. Now, what's another word for a teenage boy?
Bachur.
I'm sorry?
Bachur?
Good, bachur, right? A bachur. What does bachur sound like? What other Hebrew word is bachur sound like?
Firstborn.
Bechira, right. So bachur is a chaf, this is a ches. So bechira, choice. So interestingly, the name for it, the way we describe a teenager, a bachur, is a chooser. And a girl is a bachura. He's also a chooser. And so it gives us a little bit of an idea as to what the job of a teenager is. And the answer is to make good choices. That's what it comes down to, making good choices. Now hold on a second. With all due respect to teenagers, I'm a bacher too.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're all bachers, right? I mean, every living moment we're choosing.
Exactly.
So why would we call them bacher? People should be called bacher. What's the answer? There you got it. So, finish the point for me. So what's the answer? Huh?
It's just beginning to start choosing. It's just at the point where they start. They were kids and now they start to have a choice.
You make it this way.
They're learning.
You have experience already.
The learning will be there.
They're just starting out, they're just beginning to become choosers. But in reality,
They're experimenting, no?
well, yeah, okay, so here's the piece. I think that maybe just to bring that message all the way home is that, yeah, we all choose. And that's and the only power we have in life is a power to choose. There's nothing else that really is within our ability to affect changes and to build our character or to do the opposite. It all happens with the tool of bechira. The kind of person we are depends on our choice. That's it. Now, I could be rich. It may not depend upon my character. I could be well, not well. A lot of factors don't necessarily reflect on character. The only thing that reflects on character is the way we make our choices. Good choices and we build our character, and not such great choices causes our character to devolve a little bit. So that's the most important message of life. But for teenagers, it's especially important. And that's because it's the stage in which they're developing their identity. Their whole identity is being formed during these formative years. We'll say the adolescent years is really the creation of the human being. Now, we're 40, 50, 60 years old, we make choices, and it doesn't mean our choices are not significant. But we've defined ourselves. There are a few choices that will show up in our lives where we're going to come to a whole new definition of who we are. But adolescents, from when they're 13 to when they're, let's say, 18 and 19, well, the choices they're going to make during that period of time will be expressed by who they are when they show up to adulthood. I know it's such a sobering scene when you sometimes look at a picture of a 15, 16-year-old boy or girl that had a rough couple of years on the rapids, and they get involved in things that they shouldn't have gotten involved in, and you see a picture of them and they look like they made a lot of bad choices. And you look back at the bar mitzvah album, and they were so sweet, and they looked so innocent. You ever see those before and afters? Okay, he was mischievous at 13, whatever, he did certain things, but he was harmless. He was a 13-year-old kid, he was harmless. But you see that angelic face, he had that smile and the yarmulke and the hat and whatever, and 3 years later there's the chains and the earrings and the this and the tattoos. But what happened? It's a very defining time. It's the transformation from being a kid to becoming a young adult of these very critical years. And therefore, somehow, some way, and this will cover all of the challenges that go on in the rapids, is the fixation on making good choices. That's what it's all about. And we do want to trust them, right? Trust, you said before, it's trusting them to make those choices. But it requires knowledge and understanding. And how do you build the ability to make choices? So that's our challenge, I think, really, at the end of the day, is to be able to do that. But we want to figure out how to educate, because we're going to say difficult conversations is going to be to share information. We want to educate them, we want to expose them to what they need to know to make the good choices. So that's really our agenda. Does that make any sense? Yes. Expose them to the kind of information so they can make good, responsible choices. Putting them in environments where they can make good, responsible choices. The most important criteria to look for when you're choosing a high school is what? The most important criteria in choosing a high school is the peer group. The peer group, the most important consideration when choosing a high school is the peer group. Who are they going to be hanging around with? Who are they going to be making choices with? who are going to be their most
How would you
powerful
know? How would
influences.
you know?
Which parents are going?
Look into the friends, the peer group, where they're going, where they going. The biggest influence on the choice they're going to make are going to be their peers. It's very hard for a child to be different than all the kids that are in his class, or her class. So we want to find every possible way to help them be able to make good choices. Let's back up a little bit and put as many pieces into place as we can at the time that we have today to serve those purposes of educating and empowering with good choices. Okay, so we talked about the adults in their life. Let's start from the beginning. And we said, who are the ones that could possibly escort them down the rapids of adolescence? So the first one we said was, I think you said parents, right? Let's talk about our role as parents. How could we position ourselves to be the ones that they're going to see as partners as they go down the rapids? And it's not easy, by the way, but obviously we know that during the time of adolescence, that's when kids are pushing back. You know, one of the most effective ways to have your kids, this is tongue-in-cheek, by the way, don't take it too seriously. One of the most effective ways to have your kids be more committed to Judaism when they're teenagers is for you not to be committed to Judaism. Because our parents do the opposite, right? So for a couple of years, you become not religious, let them become religious, and you join them afterwards. That's just tongue-in-cheek, but you know, that's just how it goes. So, but to be aligned, yeah, it's work. I didn't bring it with me. I should have read it to you, but I'm going to tell it to you offhand. I wrote a book in 2006. It was called Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Talks About Chinuch. I went to Yeshiva Snei Yisrael in Baltimore. He was my Rosh Yeshiva. And he was a very, very wise, big Talmid Chacham, very wise, very unique. Some of you may have heard of it. His brother of Noach Weinberg, his younger brother who ran Eish Torah in Jerusalem. But so I put a book together, about 100 questions and answers on Chinuch. And very early on in the book, many of them came from Torah Masorah conventions. If you're familiar with Torah Masorah, that's when once a year they get together, the teachers of the Yeshiva day schools in America. And one of the highlights, when he was still alive, he passed away in 1999, was the questions and answer sessions. And he was invariably on the panel. So most of the questions that I took came from those questions and answer sessions. And they asked him one question. I'm going to tell you the question. And this is such a critical answer that he gave that it's worth it. I really say it's worth coming here today to take in what he said, because this is the key to being connected to your kids and being there during the rapids. They asked a seemingly unrelated question, but they asked him the following question. They said, Baruch Hashem, thank God we have large families. And the boys go to their father and they say, could you learn with me my Gemara, review my Gemara with me? And the girls come over to him and they say, can you study with me, my Navi, my Chumash, whatever she's learning? And they say, guy's time is limited. So he says, how do we divide our time between the girls and the boys? Okay, so hang on to your seats here, guys. This is the answer that he gave. It's in the book, black and white. He said, halachically speaking, you give the boys the attention. Spend the time with the boys. But practically speaking, equal time. Now hold on for a moment here. That's the way he said it. He was a religious man. In his world, halacha was practical. But how do you make a statement that says, halachically speaking one way, but practically something else? So he explained. He said, halachically speaking, you have an obligation to teach your son Torah. Okay, I'm not getting into the details of this here. Okay, you can discuss with your rabbis afterwards. But so yeah, halachically speaking, you spend time with it. But the problem is, and here's what he said, this is the foundation he placed down in terms of parenting. We think that the source of our authority with our kids is from the Ten Commandments, isn't that right? By the way, forgive me if I don't use the Sephardi way of saying yes. I've said this before in the past, I'm going to tell you right now. I see that whenever Ashkenazim speak to Sephardim, they try to act Sephardi, and it always sounds very awkward, and we get it. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't get it. But I've never seen a Sephardi speaker adjust how he speaks to Ashkenazi friends. That's it. I'm going to speak like an Ashkenazi. Yeah? So anyway, that's the source of our authority, Ten Commandments. I mean, that's it, right? Not anymore. Doesn't work that way. You want to tell your parents, I'm your father, respect me? Not today. You know that already, right? Yeah. Daddy said go to sleep, so what? Now, if Daddy has a gun belt, he might listen until he becomes a teenager. But outside of that, so what? Mommy said, so what? So we lost the ability to say mommy, daddy. So what is the source of our authority? And whether you like it or not, but he says it explicitly, he says the source of our authority today is our relationship. That's it. It's the power of the relationship that gives us a voice in our kid's life. He describes it as the level of loyalty, affection, and care that we experience from us is the source of our authority. And unfortunately, we see that when it doesn't exist within the relationship, and the kids get old enough to be able to flex their muscles and say who's boss, they just won't pay attention to what you have to say. There's a line that's gone around over the years that says, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Heard that before? Same idea. I need to know you care. And if I really feel that you love me, you care about me, and I'm important to you, I'll listen to what you have to say. It's the new rules of relationships in parenting today. And that's why Rabbi Weinberg said that the halacha may say one thing, and it's true in a healthy world. But today, if your girls will think for a moment you care more about the boys than the girls, you lost your girls. And that's too big of a sacrifice to lose your girls. Equal time. They must know that they're just as plenty with the boys. Even though there's a justification, but it doesn't matter. They're not going to hear it. And that's it. And that's the guiding principle. Once we have that relationship, we can discipline because we have the authority to discipline. And again, we can't fool ourselves when kids are younger and they haven't yet learned they can be chutzpahdik and that they can just disregard you. So in the early years, we think that we got away with it. We could just say it, use a firm hand, and speak very strongly, and set our boundaries. But if we weren't sufficiently paying attention to the relationship component of it, sooner than later we're going to lose that source of authority. And then when that happens, the remediation becomes you lost your ability to discipline until you spend enough time rebuilding the relationship. And it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be a year and a half. There's no exact amount of time it takes to rebuild a relationship. But that's the process that it takes to regain the sense of authority. And so therefore, it's how do you stay as a influence in your child's life? It's to make sure that relationship stays strong before their adolescence, so that they still can hear what you have to say about what's coming up. That's principle number one. Any questions about that? You good with that? Yeah.
So what about if, let's say, you're saying that you have to build a relationship with your child, what if the person's way of building a relationship is giving them what they want, and then whenever they don't get what they want, they throw a fit?
So the question is, how do you build a relationship when if you say no to them, they have a fit? So I'm going to say it, I'll emphasize the part that I mentioned before. Discipline, you have the authority to discipline when you have the relationship. It doesn't mean that one is the exclusion of the other. When you have a relationship with a child, and you know the connection is strong, and then you say, I'm sorry, I know you want to go to your friend, ain't happening tonight. And the kid tantrums, and he says, or she says, I hate you, you're the worst parent, right? What do you think would have happened 40 years ago if a child said to his parents or her parents, I hate you, you're the worst parent? They would never say it. I never say it. I was a pretty charismatic kid. I never said it. But today, who doesn't say it?
They all got
But I say,
back in that.
so before I get to that, so who doesn't say it today? So the answer is they're going to say it. But you know they're acting out. Do you really think for a moment that he hates you and he'd rather have that mother than you? Now, some people at some point are going to start getting nervous. Like the cartoon I once saw of parents standing at the doorway of their kid, Jimmy, who's at the edge of his bed, who's like this, right? And the mother says to the father in the cartoon, Jimmy just said he's going to put us in the nursing home when we get older, and I think he means it this time. So when you start to worry they're going to do that, then you might be losing the connection. But when you know you're connected and you know that you've built that relationship and they say they hate you, you know they're just acting out. You don't take it personally. You just, that's their way, and I understand, I get it, they're really upset about things, and then they cool off. So there's a lot of very important pieces over here. I don't want to get very distracted because we have a lot of really meaty things to get into. So we're talking about establishing early on this relationship. That's piece number one. Now, piece number two. Let's say you now have a 16-year-old teenager, and you start thinking to yourself, you probably should have spoken to him or her about, like, the birds and the bees. Or, now what made you suddenly think about that at 16? I mean, what was happening until then? Why suddenly did you think of the idea that you should have spoken to him about it? Well, because unfortunately you found something on the computer that they were dabbling in, and you're horrified to see it and say, like, what did we not do along the way that they ended up with this source of information or this source of entertainment? What happened? So now at 16, you're going to start wondering, like, what am I going to say to him or her? So to the extent to which you can be proactive is obviously going to be the best way to handle things, and not to wait till 16, or not to wait till a crisis. If that's what happens, we'll deal with it. We'll have to figure out what to do when, if that's the first time you're starting the intervention. But any of the difficult and challenging conversations that are going to happen are best if they're within a context. And the context is the context of the relationship. It's not a brand new conversation at 16, like, my dad's speaking about this stuff. What does he know about it? When did he come up all of a sudden talking about things we never ever even came close to a conversation like that? It's completely out of left field. So what made me all of a sudden a person to show up in his life and speak about things that had nothing to do with our relationship? Unless we had the kind of a relationship where we actually spoke about life. So here's another story to catapult us into this area and get into some of the practical pieces of it. September 11th was 2001?
Yes.
Anybody remember where they were at that time?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you? Yeah.
College.
In college? Okay. Where were you? In school? Yeah? You remember it?
Yes.
Where were you?
I was listening to school that day. I was buying a CD and nobody was listening.
So I'm going to tell you my personal story about 9/11. Huh? Okay. So I'll tell you what. I was actually I was in the morning and I was trying to get to the internet, and at the time I had Juno with a dial-up connection. So it wasn't a great connection to begin with, and I tried to get on, and there was no way to get on that morning. So whatever. And then there was a plane crash somewhere in the world, so forget that, the plane crash, maybe that took down the internet. I don't know, I wasn't sure what was going on, but fine. So I was driving to the dry cleaners in Muncie, and I had the radio on, And I called from dry cleaners, and they're talking about it's a play-by-play what's going on in Manhattan. And I'm sitting in the car, and just listening to, like, the World Trade Center just came down. So like, the World Trade Center just came, the World Trade Center just came down, like it's destroyed. And I was sitting in the car, and I was completely traumatized, like I'm sure many of you were, wherever you were. But I'm sitting at the dry cleaners, about 45 minutes listening to the reports of what's going on, and I couldn't move. And one building came down, and the next building came down, and this was unfathomable what was happening. And who knew if the whole city was going to go down, and who knew if the whole country was going to go down. At that point, your imagination took it to the end of times. Anyways, after being paralyzed in the car for about 45 minutes, I said, what am I going to do with this? Like, what do I do with this? This is just too big for me to process. So I decided I was going to drive to the local yeshiva, or Sameach. Or Sameach in Muncie? Yeah. I'm going to drive to yeshiva, and I have no answers. I have nothing to say to this. So I'm just going to go to the place that maybe I'll get an answer over there. You know how Rivka last week in the Parsha so told us she went to Shem Be'ever because she wasn't sure what's going on in her stomach. So the room, so she went to find out what's going on. So I thought, I got to find out how do you process this. I can't do this myself. So I went to the yeshiva. I walk into the building. This is at least 45 minutes to an hour after the clashes happened. I went to the yeshiva. Everybody's learning. Wow. Everybody's learning. The entire base bench is filled with people learning. I walk in, and I'm looking around and saying, wow. And guys are walking down the building. Or Sameach is a community yeshiva too. People coming in and out. So looking around and saying, wow. This is unbelievable. I can't believe it. This is the way that we're supposed to react. So I said, and I looked at the Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Shore. I said, he's learning, he's into the learning. I'm saying, I guess this is how a Jew reacts to what's going on here. I mean, this must be the answer. So I said, I'm just going to join them. I went to the shelf, I took a Gemara off the shelf, everything got to do now. And I opened the Gemara, and I said, I'm just going to do what they do. This is the reaction. So I opened the Gemara, I'm sitting there, I'm trying to learn, and I can't do it. Can't do it. And I sat there for a few minutes, I looked around, tried to get inspired, how to get back into it, can't do it. I closed the Gemara, put it back on the shelf. Now, to be honest with you, say it right here, admission, I said to myself, I will not give my answers in this place. And walked out. Wow. And that was very hard to think, like, I can't even get an answer from the yeshiva. Of course, I found out later that no one knew. Which to today, I can't understand how this is possible. But the moment they found out, they said, hello, the whole thing started kicking in. But I missed that whole thing. And I'm sitting there like, that's the answer. That's how they respond to them like that. So, it's kind of ironic because the next day, I had just started working. I spent 10 years running school-based services for OHEL. And that was my first week on the job. To advise all the schools, mental health, counseling issues. And my job the next day was to speak to staff and parents and teachers and talk about how to process what happened. So I had no idea what to do. And quite frankly, none of my colleagues knew what to do either. Everyone's like, this again, the blind leading the blind. No one knew what to do with this event. I'll tell you one thing. So one of the teachers in one of the presentations that I was giving said, I don't think the kids are really bothered what's going on. They don't ask any questions, they're not really saying anything. So I don't think I should bring it up if what happened is not affecting them. And that's when I said, I just learned a lesson yesterday. That don't make that assumption. The nurse of the school said that day there were many more injuries from recess. And kids were coming in, hit by a ball, saying, he bombed it at me. You know, they were using language of like, bombs, destruction, blowing up. So something's going on with the kids. And if you want to be a teacher for life, then you must initiate the conversation with the kids about the things that are real for them. If the Rebbe's only good to learn a Gemara, then he's not relevant to me. He's not living the world that I'm living. But anybody who was living and breathing at the time that 9/11 happened was affected by it, no matter how young they were, unless they were like one. But the kid who understands anything was affected by it. And if you want them to get the answers from the right place, then be relevant to them when life happens. Otherwise, it was Rush Limbaugh and all the other people, all the pundits who were saying, that's where the information of life comes from. So you gave it over. So you can't lose those opportunities. And so the answer really is, the broad answer to everything about knowledge and information is, live life with your kids. As life happens, address life with them. Obviously, at different ages, get addressed in different ways. But I think our first, the mindset we have to put onto ourselves is, when life happens around us, in the life of our kids, we must have some way to communicate about it. And not to say, well, I don't think we really need to hear it, they're too young, we'll bypass this particular situation. But if they are kids that are growing up, where they know their parents are relevant, when this happens, they know that their parents are the ones who can help give them guidance, give them chizuk. And by the way, there was a lot of stuff said during 9/11. I'm going to tell you one interesting thing, because I think this is one of the most important lessons to give over to our kids. And I really mean this, and I'm not saying this as a rabbi. I'm saying this is the only thing to say to our kids when something like that happens. What were people saying during 9/11? So I was paying attention, I was researching, I was hearing people saying. One lady said the following: I had kids in another school. I had kids in a school, and we went to one of the parent meetings where a psychologist spoke to the parents, and I was a parent in that school, so I went there. And the psychologist was saying, keep reassuring your kids that they're safe. Just reassure them that they're safe. So one of the mothers said, my kid said an interesting thing today. He said, this morning, the Rabbi came into class and said, don't worry, everybody, you're safe. And then the principal, what is that, louder? Oh, fine. The principal came into the class later on in the morning and said, don't worry, boys, you're safe. Then the English teacher came in and said, don't worry, boys, you're safe. So the boy said to his parents, she said this to the guy, says, when I came to school, I felt pretty safe. But after hearing from 3 different people, don't worry, you're safe, I started to get nervous. But let me ask you this. What kind of message are we telling our kids, don't worry, you're safe?
We're nervous.
The day after, New York is falling apart. How do you know you're safe? How could you guarantee their safety?
Because you were there for that.
Oh, so God forbid, the bomb blows up and the building goes, and I'm just pointing out, what's the message? What is the message that you can say to a child? But more than that, I'm going to say this is a very important guiding post. Some people will say, Emmett does outreach, so I used to be involved in outreach way back. I'm still trying to dabble in it, but I remember people would say things like, what do you tell a non-religious person? And you ask the question, right? So I would usually say to them, before you think about what you tell a non-religious person, what do you tell yourself? What is the answer? And then we'll figure out how do you communicate that to the non-religious person. But many times, when we phrase questions about what do we tell the person, we have no idea what the answer is. We phrase it as if to say we want to know what to say to them. But what is the answer? So as I say, what is our way of dealing with the 9/11 that we want to then filter down to our kids? Don't worry, I'm safe. Did we know we were safe?
You try to reinforce it with faith in God,
Oh, so the answer is
Exactly.
if you can't get away from a conversation like that without finding some way to bring God into the picture. There's no other way to do it.
Exactly.
God's watching over us. God's taking care of things. God is running the world. there's not a random world around us. And it's scary and it's hard, but we delve into Hashem and we trust in Hashem, and Hashem does what's best for us. So I'm just pointing out to you that the answer we give to our kids when we address life issues has to begin with what are we telling ourselves? What is the real answer? And then we'll figure out how do you say it to a 5-year-old, how do you say it to a 10-year-old, how do you say it to a 15-year-old? But coming back to the point we're making here, which is if we are parents for life, I said before teachers for life, I say parents for life. That means that as life happens in the life of our kids, we have conversations with them about what's happening. And I think that's capitalizing that. So the conversation at 15 is a part of our relationship. It's just that now there's a new topic that arose. But we talk about life. We talk about things like that. Okay, that's, okay, let's move forward. What time are we at? Whatever, and again, when we get to questions and answers, you can ask me specific topics if you have a question about them, and we'll still get into some specific topics. But whatever we're going to be talking to them about, when we sit down with them, it could be one of two ways, by the way. Especially with adolescents, one of the ways I can tell you that often does not work is when you say to your teenager, let's talk. You try that? Hey Jimmy, let's talk. Sure, Dad. What do you want to talk about? All of a sudden, let's talk is all the bells and whistles sound off. Like, what does Dad want from me? I'm not interested in talking. Right? I mean, you can barely ask how was your day without getting a crabby answer. So let's talk. So that's usually not the best way to engage a conversation with a teenager. Eye contact, is that a good thing? Very good thing, but not with teenagers, right? Because that's too intense. Like you're being way too intense, way too formal. So let's talk. No, look at me. Face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact. So when we do parenting classes and a relationship with your husband or wife, we encourage eye contact because you want to make a connection. But when it comes to talking to teenagers, usually you're much better off if it's not so formal. So how does it happen? How does the conversation happen? Yeah, look, if an event happens in the world, like 9/11 happens, Chas v'shalom shouldn't happen again, but if something happens and you want to talk about it, then we've had situations that we as Jewish people have to deal with. So it could be a separate conversation, something happened today, and start a conversation. One-on-one with a teenager, it's very hard to have these formal conversations. So you want to catch them and they're not ready for it. Like for instance, you just gotta pop in their room. You ever do that? You don't pop in your teenager's room and you just sit on a random something that's in the room and look out the window and say, just say something totally unrelated to what you want to talk about. And just be there. And then maybe just express a curiosity, like not looking at them. It's like, you just kind of, not about them, it's just, if you hang around long enough and they're in a decent mood, they might actually start talking. You're sitting in the car and you're driving. That's the best. I'm not looking at you in the backseat. Oh, how's school doing these days? Hold on, wait, the car over there? You have to make it sound like you're not really paying attention. You just like, you're almost graduating high school, but, well, let's take a photo, there's a car coming here. Anything going on? It's really, so most of the time we try to catch them in that kind of a way. So let's get a little further here. So then when you kind of like nonchalantly, as they say in Hebrew, you're just kind of speaking about stuff, and if you get lucky, like the fish starts to tug at the fishing rod, so at that point, you just let it happen. when a teenager starts to talk, don't get in the way. Right? Let them say whatever they say.
Hear them out.
Huh?
Hear them out.
Just let them talk. Don't even ask any questions. Just they're starting. So just, and maybe they say something that's like, inappropriate, or they say it in a way that's not respectful. Just this is gold. Let them get it out. Whatever they're saying, just let them go. Also, when they're talking, you can make it very clear to them that you have no idea what it's like to be a teenager. Like, I don't know, tell me what it's like to be a teenager. I mean, don't say it that way. That sounds way too formal, but like, what's it like? I'm not even sure what it's like. I grew up in a whole different era. Tell me what it's like, when that kid does that, or whatever the situation happens to be. Be prepared to go in there not knowing. And be curious. And the more you can learn about their world, the more effective you can subsequently be. So I had a situation, I'm going to tell you one situation that I had. There was a boy that, I don't want to say any details, but let's just say it was a 20-some-odd-year-old boy, still acting like an adolescent, even if he wasn't technically a teenager, but he was really struggling with his parents. And I firmly believe, and we can discuss this at a different time, in my world and in my work, when it comes to working with, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I do a lot of relationship work and dating coaching, so everything is dialogue-centric. I just want people to get engaged in dialogue. And I say, if you can get to dialogue, you're in a good place. Even if it's a tough dialogue, but it's get to dialogue is my mantra. And if I'm working with a teenager, in the back of my mind, I'm already thinking, how am I going to get them in the room with the parents? Which isn't such an easy thing with teenagers. But this was an example of where I was able to get this young man with his parents in the room. And the boy is talking about how frustrated he is about not being trusted, and he was making a lot of bad choices. So he didn't really deserve to be trusted. He was making a lot of bad choices. But he talked about the importance of being trusted. And all my friends this, and my friends that. So he made his whole presentation. And it was my interest in having the parents just stay out of the way, don't get reactive, just learn about your child's world. That's it. Don't answer back nothing, just stay curious till the end. We'll discuss, maybe if there's another session, we'll discuss any response, but the response is not important because you're gaining such valuable information what's going on for them. So anyway, after he finishes, so the father wanted to respond. So I couldn't hold him back, he wanted to respond. So the father gave a very articulate and a very compelling presentation about the importance of responsibility, accountability, how he's a role model for his younger siblings. And he really gave, he could have been here and given the talk about that. It was extremely articulate. And then he finished. At which point I asked the boy to leave the room. And I said, I didn't want the boy to hear this, but I said to the parents, I said to the father specifically, I said, I have to tell you something. Your presentation was perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. I really couldn't have. It was so articulate, it was so clear, it was so sensible. It was the perfect speech for 40 years ago. I said, why, what do you mean? He said, it's an outdated speech. Nothing you said resonated with your child. You can't talk that language. You should go to Minyan 20 so your 18-year-old brother should learn from you and go to Minyan. It doesn't work. That's not the responsibility we put on 19-year-olds today. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't work. It used to be that way, many, many years ago. That's not the world of the teenager today. You're not relating to them. It's hard. It's hard to raise teenagers because the world has changed. But if you don't know what you're dealing with, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So hearing how they think and where they're at and what their world looks like is critical before you even think to advise. And so that's why I say saying let's talk is hardly going to work. Finding a way to say it so that they're caught off guard and they start to talk and you're lucky to be speaking, let them speak, hear them, understand them, let it all come out there. You'll discuss, figure out afterwards what to do with the information you get. But that's a critical first step. I mean, it starts early on, by the way. We have our own preconceived notions that we jump at. But, I'm going to say it for now because I don't want to run out of time to say things we need to say over here. Okay. So, knowledge, the relationship, right? The primacy of the relationship. We want to be there from the beginning so that we are a source of authority to them. We want to have this become a natural part of our relationship when we talk about life with them. So let's talk about a specific topic about, let's say, the birds and the bees, right?
About what?
The birds and the bees. That was the original title. So now what happens? When do we start that conversation? When do we start that conversation? Age 13? Boys 13, what do you say?
When they ask.
Toddlers.
When they ask, okay, good. 13, when they ask. Toddlers?
I'm talking about general, obviously, age appropriately, but I'm saying in terms of even just being familiar with their bodies and their body parts and different things like that. It starts.
Okay, good. So I'm going to tell you, I don't know when it was, a while back, I was at a Torah Sorah convention, and Aaron Feldman, the Rosh Yeshiva of Bnei Yisrael, who's the yeshiva that I went to, although he became Rosh Yeshiva after I left, he touched upon this idea of teaching this kind of material, but it was really just thrown in as an aside to whatever he was speaking about. And it reminded me about the importance of being able to teach parents how to speak to their kids. So I went over to Shmuel Kamenetsky, who was there, and it was an interesting conversation. I said to Shmuel, I said, I think it's really important to teach parents how to speak to their kids about these matters. So he said, yeah, I think it's also important. Who's going to teach them? So I said, I'll teach them if you tell me what to tell them. So if you know Shmuel, he has very good sense of humor, very personable, and he said, I don't know what to say. So I went, Rabbi and Feldman was standing right next to him. And I said to him, would you teach me what to teach and tell the parents? And we sat down and we schmoozed. And we subsequently had multiple conversations about it, to the point that he actually worked out scripts with me about how to speak to kids about different things along the way. So in the course of the conversations that I had with him, it was clear that the discussion of the birds and the bees does not begin when a child is 12, 13, 14 years old, 10 years old. It's, like I said before, that our relationship with our kids starts in the very beginning. We talk about life as life happens. So what do you do when you teach your child Chumash, and he's 5 years old? That's when you start talking about the birds and the bees. Oh, hold on a second. What exactly do you say then? So the whole conversation begins with a frame. The challenge we have today in the United States, Western civilization, is the perspective towards sexuality. When our kids get exposed to sexuality, what is the premise of their sources of exposure? What is sexuality? How is it framed by the sources of their exposure? The earliest educators of sexuality are teaching them what? I don't want to get into, let me leave that question open, because I'm going to show you the contrast. A Jewish conversation on sexuality is based on what premise? Exactly. Kedusha? Exactly. Kedusha. The battle we have, the raging battle we have in the conversations we have with our kids, in raising our kids to have the right perspective of sexuality, is it Kedusha, or is it everything else that the world frames it as? And that's a tough battle. The way you relate to it is going to make the biggest difference. Now, by the way, you said Kedusha is the answer, but I just want to also clarify something here for everybody. Kedusha means holy, right? And it is holy. But, I should say but, I should say and, right? It's very practical. Sexual experiences are not angelic interactions. They're very practical. There's practical discussions about connection. There's practical discussions about pleasure. All that stuff is included in Kedusha. So we're not making it devoid of human existence. In fact, that's really our uniqueness. Because if you follow the history of the approach towards sexuality, you have paganism, which is pretty much like it is today. Sexuality is indulgence. So it's a fixation on sexuality. It's really a paganistic approach that the media presents to our kids. If you take the Christian approach to sexuality, you're talking about sin. And that's sin. So immaculate conceptions is because God can't be born from a sexual encounter. So they separate it. But Judaism is the only stream, an approach to sexuality that integrates it with the physical world. It's a complete, so holiness is always going to be an integration. We live as very grounded people. Mitzvot. Mitzvahs. Yeah. Mitzvahs ground us. We don't live in the world of meditation. It's very grounded. Our spirituality is grounded. So sexuality is grounded also. And that's what Kedusha means anyway. Eating on Shabbos, which is holy, is the uniqueness of Judaism. It's the integration of things. So we need to be able to teach a sexuality that is framed in this concept of Kedusha. But we don't stand a chance if they spend 5, 6, 7 years being exposed to the paganistic approach to sexuality. It's a tough battle, and the exposure today is out of control. I mean, I tell you, I got to a point when I meet a teenager, I didn't, years back when I first started, I was maybe a little bit naive, so it took me a lot to realize that I asked teenagers, like, do you get exposed to pornography? And the percentage of the answer of the affirmative, good people, good kids, was astounding. I mean, to survive adolescence without being exposed to pornography today is a miracle in most instances. It happens, exposure happens by accident. So I'm at this another Torah convention. It was actually in Lakewood. I was the only non-Lakewood guy there. I was one of the speakers, and Rabbi Feldman was the only non-Lakewood Rosh Hashiva. And on Friday night, the questions and answers, I fell asleep halfway through it, and he was very directly talking about the birds and the bees. He was very explicit, and I missed it all because I fell asleep. And I woke up at the end and said, wow, what did I miss, So after it was over, we had an onig, and I was sitting at a table with about 10 principals. Happened to be Lakewood. I'm not putting the Lakewood for the moment here. I just happened to be with Lakewood. That was it. That was the Torah Masorah convention for Lakewood educators. So one of the guys said to me, so what do you think what the Baltimore Shiva said? I said, I'll tell you the truth, I was kind of knocked out. But what do you think? So he said, I think maybe what he was saying was more like for the Baltimore crowd, or maybe Muncie, but I don't think our kids here in Lakewood, I don't think that they don't really know that much. So, I don't think it's. I was a chassan teacher, he says to me. I was a teacher of chassanim before they got married, and they talk a big game, but they don't know anything. I said, really, that's interesting. Now, this story happened, let's say 10 years ago, right? So I said to him, so really interesting, when was the last time you taught a chassan? He said, about 16 years ago. What, did anything change? I said, wow. 26 years ago from today, did anything change? I said, I don't know what to tell you, but they don't just know, they've seen. And they didn't just see it because they snuck a magazine out of the drugstore. They saw it. They saw it. It was horrifying. So to survive adolescence and not get exposure is a miracle. You have to have a special shmirah. Not this, not that. How do we beat it? How do we beat it? So Rabbi Feldman says, okay, here comes a parsha in the Torah. Avram is going to send Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. And he says, before you do that, I want you to make an oath. Right? So he makes an oath. Now, hold on, hang on over here. Okay, I know this is getting very risky and dicey. What does he make an oath on?
Bris.
On his bris.
Yeah.
Okay, now, on his bris. What does that mean, on his bris? So when you teach your child that story, you talk about the bris. You know what the bris is? It's a covenant. It's the relationship between us and Hashem. It's the bris. Does he know what a bris is? Have you talked about a bris? Not the circumcision. Does he know what a bris is? A covenant and a relationship with God. Now I know that there are a lot of postmodern books written on how to speak to kids, Jewish books too, that like to be very explicit when they teach aspects of sexuality to their kids. And they feel if you're explicit with them, so you're being very open and candid, and that's a good thing. I might not be the majority opinion about this here, so I'm willing to take pushback on this. But it's okay to label a body part so they know what you're talking about. But Judaism doesn't do that. Judaism actually uses what they refer to as borrowed language. You know that? Borrowed language. Which means there's no actual word to describe the place of the bris. There's no Hebrew word for it, no biblical word for that. Do you realize that? Do you think anybody here think they know a word for it? It's okay, we're adults, you can hear it. A biblical word for the place of the bris. Anybody know what the word is for that? There is no. There's actually no word for intercourse in Hebrew, in the Jewish language. There's no word for the woman's private parts. Well, how do you call it? They're all borrowed terminology. The bris is the terminology we're going to use to describe that part of the male anatomy. Now, you need to know the English word to understand when you're describing the body part, you know what it is, identify it, but in the language we speak to our kids, it's the bris. Now, people will say, now you're making it sound like it's dirty. I don't know, just the opposite. The reason Maimonides says that we use lashon of borrowed language is because things that are holy and things that are precious are protected. It's not secretive, it's private. The language, the conversations we have with them, is not a secret. Secret is just like a secret. I can tell my kids the secret, my friends the secret. It's a private conversation. Tznius shows how special something is, not how dirty it is. And it's a very big misconception. It shows how special and precious that it is. We don't just flaunt it. The world flaunts. But we have things that are important to us, we keep guarded and protected. So lashon mush'al, borrowed language, is used for things that are very holy. And so from an early stage, we teach them that that's the bris. And of course, when you want to make an oath on something that's holy and precious, what else did Avram have at the time? There was no Sefer Torah. So of course, make it on the bris. So the orientation you're already teaching a child at 5 years old is the preciousness of the bris. Now, just to show you how this continues to play out, and I'm going to read to you the transcript that Rabbi Feldman helped me put together, and he went through them, and you can see if I can find it for you here.
What is the female's anatomy called?
The Osamakom. That place.
Osamakom?
Yeah. So you guys want to take it here? Okay, 1 second. So like this. If you're gonna, okay. Teaching your child, I'm going to come back, I'll go backwards with the description of how you describe procreation. But if the child asks you, okay, well maybe I should back up. It's in sequence. You're going to describe how children are born. What do you describe to your kids? Here's a possibility. Hashem created, and this conversation is factual. It's not the first time the conversation is happening. He knows about a bris. He knows about, there's stories about laying down, and there's times in the Chumash that it's talking about people in bed together, laying down next to each other. It's okay to know that there's a man and a woman can lay down in the same bed. There's no focus on intercourse, but they're in the same bed. They can be in the same bed. Notice that they lie together. Rabbi says it's okay to say lie together. Let a kid understand that happens. They're not ready to hear what might happen in the bed, but they lie together. And you bring out pieces over the course of the years. Comes the conversation. And he says, Hashem created, and you're explaining to your child, like you'd explain anything that he needs to understand about life. Hashem created a magnetic pole between man and woman. Classic example of opposites attracting is like magnets. Same issue with men and women. There's a magnetic attraction between a man and a woman. Now, if you say this to a kid who's 10 years old, 11 years old, you know that if you give a choice, forgive me for being open about this, but we're supposed to be open. You have a choice to either see a pornographic picture or a monster with 7 heads. Which one is that 10-year-old want to see? Now they're precocious, but back in the olden days. That's disgusting, that one. The 10-headed monster, yeah, I want to see that. You can collect those pictures, right? But then all of a sudden, a switch happens, and you suddenly get attracted to the opposite gender. So they need to understand what's going on.
What did you say?
There's no exact number, like the 11th birthday bingo, it's like always being one step ahead of the curve, because you want to beat the influence that's going to come down the pipe. So you do have to make an estimation. And by the way, this is also, I'm going to talk about sexuality now, but even the onset of puberty is a conversation. Mothers with their daughters, husbands with fathers with their sons. Explain what's going on in their body. Their body is undergoing changes. They're feeling things that are different. A girl has a period. I remember a principal of a very big school once said that a girl came running to the office because she was dying. She was dying, she was bleeding to death. No one in the family you told her what might happen, And it's a little too late if she already has it before she was told about it. So you want to be ahead of the curve, because this is life happening. As life happens to your kids, their body's feeling funny, they're growing pains, and they're growing hair, and all kinds of things that happen to them. What's going on with you? And so you shouldn't be afraid of their body. You explain to them there's a metamorphosis. This is actually a stage where you're going from being a child and you're beginning the physical transformation of becoming an adult. And that's what we discussed. The adolescent period is that transformation period between being a child and being an adult. The choice is made during that time. You're a bacher during that time because you are not only physically being defined by nature, but you are characterologically being defined by your choices. It's a period of time of definition. And if they know that about their bodies, they can appreciate that about their choices. You're setting up a model for them. So now, and so things are happening, and maybe they're going to start to feel an attraction to the opposite gender, which they didn't feel when they were looking at those 7-headed monsters. So explain what's going on. Don't ignore it. Life is happening to them. Hashem created a magnetic pull between man and woman, like opposites attracting with magnets, the same issue with man and woman. Just like a magnet attracts metals, a woman is able to draw men, which awakens his desire to get close. Well, that's what's going on. When that happens, here we get, right? The father's zera, which we'll translate as the seed, the father's seed, comes together with the mother's egg, and they produce a baby with Kedushas Yisrael. They produce life together. The attraction is the process by which the man and woman come together so they can produce a child. That's what sexuality is. I mean, we're not getting into the relationship aspect of sexuality, but it's to produce a child with a neshama. You're producing people, and that's like, imagine it, we produce people. So, child, son, daughter, be careful of this magnet, which can be very strong. Even though it starts at this age, but it's really intended to be used with the person that you will end up marrying and producing a family with. So we have to be careful. It's a very strong draw, and be aware of things that cause us, anything that arouses the pull before marriage. And that's the challenge of adolescence, is that there's going to be a lot of opportunity, a lot of times when there's going to be a feeling of being drawn to it, and we say it's not a bad draw, it's a natural draw. So we want to also make sure they don't feel guilty when they end up having thoughts and feelings that they were told was wrong. It's not wrong, it's just not the right time. So we want to put that into the context also. We'll talk about what happens when they mess up. Now, if he asks where the seed comes from, see, we figured, okay, I said my speech, you know, Dad, wait. Where does the seed come from? And you ever had a conversation with your kids and you think like, they say in Hebrew, he who understands will understand, like, I don't have to say everything outright, right? So your daughter says, yeah, but where does the baby come from? Where's the baby? Like,
They want to know how the
so,
seed comes out.
huh?
They want to know how the seed comes out.
Right. So where does that's my question I said, but the girl says like, where did it come from? Your stomach? So how does it get in there? You swallow the baby and it, so, you know, they may not ask it, but they could ask it. So he said, where does the seed come from? So I just want to tie it to what we said from the very beginning. So what do you say about where the seed comes from? Good. So here we go. Where does it come from? Yeah? So the answer back is, where do you think it comes from? Where do you think it comes from? So, right? The mouth? Yeah, I mean, you're talking about producing a person. I mean, this is like, you know, like an art project where you make a stem, like you're making a person here. So the seed that's going to produce the child, it's going to come out of the mouth? That wouldn't be the best place to come. Would it be? No, what else? What else?
Yes.
So, of course, since the seed is holy, because it produces children, it cuts the holiest part of man. The organ in which Avram and all of us have the bris milah. Where else would the seed come from? Like you said, like, of course, isn't that, you remember the oath that he took in the good, where else would the seed come from? Huh?
So you can't say that with girls, there's no bris milah for girls.
The question was where the seed comes from. So, I just, so you tell her, there's a place in the mother's, this area, it's a room, it's a special room, and when the seed comes into the mother, so it grows like a plant grows, but a baby grows inside the mother's special room, and it's a very comfortable place and whatever. But you communicate it. Now there's a lot of aspects of this, and we could open to quit. It's late, 10 o'clock already, but I just, so much to say, but let's just say this. In all the challenging conversations that may come up, and whether it's sexuality, whether it's about, you mentioned death before, I think in the introduction, tragedy, finances, challenging finances, whatever the conversation is, I want to go back to what I said about this, the curative model. My effectiveness as a parent to my child is going to be, and the effectiveness of the way I communicate about the topic at hand is going to be commensurate with the level of knowledge and comfort that I have about the topic. So this is something to think about. If we're talking specifically about the area of sexuality, how comfortable am I about my own sexuality? And sometimes the difficulty of talking about it is because of not because we project it on them that they're not going to be able to know this, but am I insecure about it? are my fears about how I talk about this with my child. And that's a place to kind of work it through. But as I said before, the critical pieces over here is making this the kind of relationship we have with our kids. And it starts early on in terms of the care and loyalty that we show them. That's the general context of our relationships, that we are influenced to them, but that we talk to them about life as life happens. And here's just the next stage. And if we put it in the context of the transformation, the physical transformation of puberty, where they definitely need to understand what's going on with their bodies, that's the segue to be able to say, you're in the process of becoming an adult. Now let's think about this for a moment. What is the difference between being a child and an adult? So one of the big differences is a child is a receiver. Isn't that right? A child's a receiver. That formative part of our life is that we're being mushba, we're being influenced. The transformation, when you go from a child to becoming an adult, is you become a mashpia. Now you're the influencer. You become the giver. And once you hit the stage of young adulthood, the rest of your life you're a giver. So this period of time of the transformation is preparing yourself to become the giver. There is no, ultimately, the greatest gift you can give somebody is giving them life. So the capacity to produce a child is probably the most powerful way to describe what you're becoming. You're becoming a person who can give, who can create. But it's a journey. That's the journey that the child's going on. The rapids is the kur habarza. It's the period of time in their life as choosers that they will determine whether they emerge on the other side of adolescence as developed adults who are ready to take on the future of their life, or whether they leave it, with deficits. And in fact, last night was a conversation about singles and dating, and the truth of the matter is that the way kids navigate this period of their life will affect the way they date and will affect the way marriages will go. As I tell people when they're trying to date, teenagers cannot date, but when I'm specific about it, I say developmental teenagers cannot date. Biological teenagers can date. If you're 19 years old, but you've gone through the transformation that adolescence is about, and you emerge with a series of good choices where you develop a sense of responsibility, then you're ready to date. But if you emerge out of adolescence just a party animal, you're a risk factor for your marriages. You're not ready to date. And you can be 50 years old and not ready to date. How long does it take till you finally get out of the phase of fast cars and tight pants? You know what I mean? Like eventually you got to become an adult, right? So, but this is the period of time in which everyone can have, the conversations as they're approaching bar mitzvah in our community. My wife kind of organized it, but we asked the rabbi of our shul, Rabbi Chaim Shabbos, big Talmid Chacham. So we had a nice, an evening for bar mitzvah boys. Boys who are within the age of between 12 and 13, maybe after bar mitzvah also, and he spoke about a very good program. Maybe this is the kind of thing which can go on in communities too. Because Rabbi Shabbos spoke about the halachos. What's it like to be a bar mitzvah when you daven as a shliach tzibur? How do you do it the right way? So he went through. It was very, very informative. The boy now is for boys, right? Because boys will be part of the minyan in that kind of way. So he went through the halachos of it. And I spoke to the boys about, at the level that they can understand what their the period of time that they're going into, which is that period of responsibility, making the choices. Again, trying to say it in a way that they can relate to it. But that's really the way to frame that stage of adolescence. It's a transformation. The body transforms. Nature will transform them into an adult, and now they also have to make the choices so they can characterologically be changing into an adult. Yeah, okay. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay, good.
I appreciate hearing the fact that you have to tell your child who's going to adolescence about the birds and the bees or about what's happening to their body in a very sensitive and a kedusha way. My fear is that oftentimes it can spark some type of curiosity. So how do you prevent them or teach them not to, abuse that curiosity, or let's say shomer habrit, to put it lightly? How would you suggest to be able to address that type of thing?
So let me understand the question. It's that if you speak to them about it, it might pique their curiosity, and that what might happen because of that? And as a result of that, what are you concerned about? That maybe
Well, that's fine.
action on it. So this has been presented as a concern in sex education, right? That you give ideas to the kids. So my notes have here, it is a myth that if you speak to kids, they'll experiment or share with others. If you speak to them properly, you actually reduce the risk. So, yeah, it's a task that has to be done right. I think we spoke about some of the parameters today. Private versus secret. It's private. If you have any questions, you can always ask me. And if you don't feel comfortable asking me, remember back to the beginning of our presentation, if it's not me, you can ask. And you can go through people that he might feel more comfortable asking, or she might be more comfortable asking. Maybe there's a teacher, maybe there's some other mentor, some they're close with. You don't have to come to me. I'm available, and they have to know that you're, but it's the tone and the context in which you present it. Now, think about the alternative. If that isn't compelling enough, think about the alternative. As I said earlier, without a special shmira from Hashem, they will get exposure. If it's not the ultimate exposure, their friends are going to talk about it.
Exactly.
They're going to get it. And they're going to get it somehow, some way, and we have to be one step ahead of it. It's the same thing with things like evolution. That was always a conversation too. If we don't beat them to it, they're going to learn it that way, and then we have to undo it. And it's always harder to undo. We want to get there first. We want to establish the muskul rishon, the first instinct. We want to help them get the first instinct to something. And then when they get exposed to the other, which they probably will, they're empowered to see it. They're already been exposed to it in the right way, so they have a much better chance of being able to say no or to pull away from it. So anyway, that's the story. But I think in terms of the shiko das, if we do it right, we need to be able to be ahead of the curve. Yeah.
So this might not be the forum for this, but how do you introduce the topic of drugs and that whole world to teenagers?
How do you introduce it?
Well, not introduce it, but how do you discuss it, and what do you recommend to bring it? Do you recommend bringing it up as a topic? Or do you recommend
I think all these things should be brought up. I mean, look, why don't you take a look at that video I mentioned before? It's worth seeing it just to see whether, if you have a teenager who you think it'd be appropriate to, and you can have a conversation about it afterwards. It definitely will elicit reactions. Again, it's the Mon Foundation. I think that's the website's name. It's called L'chaim. The video is called L'chaim. A conversation like that, if you think you can get away with a formal conversation, then go ahead for it. So when I said before about the informal conversations, you walk into shul with your kid, you're sitting in a car, driving carpool. By the way, did anybody talk about drugs in your school? So the guys that are smoking, is weed a big thing in your school? Just like as if you don't know anything. So you get the conversation started that way. And I do think you can get a lot out of kids if you just speak like unassuming, almost like clueless way. So. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, just quickly, you were mentioning that the Rabbi had mentioned to use a certain language, like to use hidden language when describing body parts or things like that.
Right.
Is that to say not to teach them what the, English word?
No, I say you can teach your body parts, but you don't have to continue to talk that language because
I hear.
when
So
you
in addition to
when you
means
mention things like the bris, it's not because that's such a big learning point.
Right.
It's not because it's something which is dirty. It's not a Christian approach. It's because things that are precious to us are tznius is represents something precious, and then that's the whole. I mean, isn't that how Ladies over here, when you went to Beis Yaakov, right? Didn't they teach you about tznius? That it's not about oppression, but it's because your body is.
Because I missed the part about actually saying what the other, yeah.
I mean, it's obvious. Right? And for the right time, the right place, the right person, the right way, it's, yeah. Opportunities, yeah.
So what happens if you have children of different ages and the ages range from very young to older?
Right.
And they ask these questions in front of the younger children.
Oh, so then everyone gets their own conversation.
So you'll say, hey,
Everyone
we'll
gets their
talk
own
about this, then we'll
conversation.
talk about
Guys,
it later.
right,
How do you
right.
bring it up then?
Right.
By the way, do you remember?
We've had funny conversations where one of our kids, would ask it and everyone have a good laugh about it, but the conversation happens privately.
So how do you say, like, I'll talk about it with you privately?
You just say, look, guys, everyone gets their own conversation. Their own conversation. We're not afraid, but everyone their own conversation.
And how do you say, like, let's say, for example, if your child is like a girl, because we've been talking about boys, so if your child's a girl and is asking where do babies come from, how are babies made?
Well, I mean, the seed and the egg meet together, and they are housed in mother's womb.
So how's it come out? My daughter asked me, how does it come out?
How it comes out? What are you going to do? How it comes out?
Actually,
And it expands. It expands, and then eventually closes up again, and so it comes out. But if you're showing anxiety in the answer, you're going to answer, wait. This is it comes out. He says, of course it comes out. For the bris, what do you mean? It's not like you're like, this is going to be a serious, hold on a second, let me take a deep breath. Here's how it comes out.
She never asked us age.
No, you don't have to volunteer the details. And you just want to be just ahead of the curve. Just ahead of the curve. And 10 might be a little bit precocious, but the conversations, how you relate to these things, is away from the conversation.
When she asked me, I said, when you get married, I should do something.
Okay.
She's cool, she's really know.
Yeah. But don't wait till she's married. Okay, you wanted the question, was there questions, right?
You were saying that we should be one step ahead. How do you know it's the right time to have that conversation?
I hear. Okay, good question. Yeah, it's hard to know, but be safe than sorry. If you're a little bit earlier, it's okay. You just want to make sure you're the first one to get them to this conversation. Kids are precocious. It comes in earlier and earlier. The boys will choose the wrong picture at an early age, and they used to choose that wrong picture.
How do we avoid the uncomfortability?
Okay, well, hold on a second, let me get to this question. Yeah.
You mentioned about Rabbi Weinberg or Rabbi Weinberg. What's the name of
The book, that I quoted from about Yaakov Weinberg talks about chinuch. I feel bad because I think it's out of print, but I have the last copies. Yeah, I may have the last copies. So I never reprinted it. It's still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I'll get some references.
It might cost $10,000.
Right.
How much? 58. I can get it 15. But next time we'll figure out.
I'll get some references and links for you guys, and I'll send it to.
Yeah. By the way, it's a little commercial break here. It won't cost anything. But if you're interested in any of my material, you can go to my website at donielfrank.com. DONIELFRANK. DONIELFRANK.com. There's podcasts on marriage, on dating, and that sort of things. But
Doniel, is it a dot after the name?
no, just DonielFrank, straight word.com.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
What if, the kids come up to the mother and ask that question, what do you want to answer, and ask the father, so hear it, the father gives another answer, and depends on the
If they ask, whatever the parents give different answers. I mean, I'm not sure what's going to be different about the answer. They might say the same thing in different ways, but maybe this is a good opportunity to coordinate and figure out how you're going to say what you're going to say. So, but yeah.
What if you have already a teenager, let's say 15, and you don't know how much you know her? Or like, and how you approach her without
So
making
you
her...
find, so good question. How do you know what they know? You ask. And you before you make any assumptions, just find out, I'm sure you've heard about the birds and bees. What do you know about it so far? You just ask, find out. Because it's important. That's a good question. Find out what they know. Find out what their perceptions are, so you know what you're up against. You know, there's another story about the the kid that said to his parents, you know, where do I come from? Yeah. So they said to the parents, oh my gosh, well, this is like 5-year-old kids asking already. I mean, so far as you know, there's a sucker, it's in the cave, you know, a male and a female, and a male on top of the women, and it produces the seed, and then the baby, and that. And he goes through this whole thing, sweating through the whole conversation, and the boy says, it's so interesting. I just want to know where my friend comes from New York.